welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Novak, and tonight I'm going to read you a bedtime story. Good news, my partnership with the wrong station has been extended to the next couple weeks. I want to say this isn't some sort of paid partnership at all. This is literally just me being a fan of the wrong station, and we're fans of each other, and them being so kind as to let me read a few of their incredible stories on my show. Remember, they're also an anthology podcast, so you can jump into any episode you so choose. They're a small team of 3, and I know a thing or two about being a small team, so I admire their pluck and their talent, and I hope you do too. Last week's episode got some incredible feedback. It made me so happy. It made them happy as well. I've also had a few listeners of theirs jump over to my show, and they said that they're having a lot of fun seeing my interpretations and versions, or I guess there's only one so far, but my interpretation and version of that story as opposed to the wrong station's version. And I agree, it's really fun to see how different artists can take one story and make it completely different. I mean, not completely different, but, have such different ways of producing it. So this has been so much fun, and I'm so glad that they're around. Thank you, wrong station. Anyway, enough of me yapping. This week is another story written by Alexander Saxton. Please enjoy The Candle. "You're lucky, lad," said Mrs. Belmartin. It was only mid-afternoon, but the long, dark-paneled corridors of Gogrim Manor were already dark, and she carried a silver candelabrum in her hard, white hand as she led him about his new duties. "I know," said Carden. He said it with feeling. The halls here had always been cold, but his new livery of green velvet and gold brocade and hard-soled, buckled shoes kept him warm, far warmer than the ragged shirt and breeches of a bucket boy ever had. "I know you know," said Mrs. Belmartin. "Anything's better than cleaning up Jordan pots, but you've locked an extra step up the ladder, lad. Their servants been here 15 years who'd do crimes to have your new position." "Switching out candles?" "That's right. 157 rooms in Gogrim Manor, each of them lit with candles at night, and each candle only allowed to be lit once, otherwise reflects poorly on the Earl's reputation. What happens to all those candles after they get lit once?" Carden had never given it any thought. The economics of chandlery weren't a high-priority topic for a bucket boy. At any given rate, between 40 and 70 people lived at Gogrim Manor, and, regrettably, most of them shat roughly once a day. Even without candles, bucket boys had enough literal shit to think about. "The answer is that it doesn't matter to the Earl," said Belmartin. "So the butler sells them in town and pockets the change." "All right, So you're the one as collects the used candles and hands them off to him, which means you lose a few now and again and start to line your own pockets. If you're not stupid, then in a couple of years you'll be able to leave this slave's life and set yourself up as a free man." "This is England, Mrs. Belmartin," he said. "Everybody's free." "Course they are." She stopped in front of a heavy door of coffered oak and rapped loudly. 2, 3, 4, she muttered, and then pushed it open. They emerged blinking into a vast, empty room. Gray light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows to bleach the gray-blue furniture and carpet, and reflect dully from a black lacquer folding screen in the corner. In front of the cold fireplace stood a large table covered in papers and instruments, beakers, tongs, alembics, maps of the continent scrawled with arcane sigils and notations, a brass implement with spidery legs.
"See what I did just there?"
said Belmartin.
"Always knock, and for the love of God, wait a few moments after you do."
"Why?"
"Because it's none of your business what the upstairs folk get up to behind shut doors. And servants who make it their business have been known to get made someone else's business, if you ken what I saying."
She drew one of those hard white fingers across her hard white throat.
"I'm saying, knock and wait. Always knock and wait."
She gestured around the room.
"I knew for a fact that the philosophical doctor is not currently in residence. He left for London 2 days ago to attend the funeral of his daughter, which is today, but I still knocked and waited, because I knew that somebody else might know the same thing and choose today to dig through the philosophical doctor's effects."
As she spoke, he made his way around the room, prying loose used candles from their sockets and replacing them with fresh candles from the velvet bag slung over his shoulder.
"Why would they do that?"
"I don't know and I don't care. But if they did,
I wouldn't want to catch them at it, because what games the rich play are none of my business. My business, Carden, and yours, is to make it through this vile life in as close to one piece as possible. Do you understand?"
"Yes, Mum." At this point, he was down by the other end of the room, prying used candles out of the wall sconces, and he was half hidden from her sight by the black lacquer screen. Not quite tall enough to reach the sconce without bobbing on the tips of his shoes, he fumbled one of the candles on his way down and had to crawl on his hands and knees as it rolled under a small writing desk behind the screen. The desk was painted with the same coromandel lacquer and golden chinoiseries as the screen itself. As he rummaged underneath it, he realized the cabinet alone was worth more money than he would ever make in his life.
"Got you,"
he muttered, catching hold of the candle.
"Wait, what's this?"
When he withdrew his hand, he found he had gotten hold of not one but 2 candles. One, the one that had dropped, was molded from expensive, buttery beeswax. The other was a greasy, hand-dipped candle of animal tallow. Taking the opportunity provided by the screen, he pocketed both.
"Ready for the next room, Carden?"
said Mrs. Belmartin when he emerged from the screen. She had a knowing gleam in her eyes, and he self-consciously shifted the bag on his hip to conceal the bulge of the candle ends in his pocket. Wanting to distract her with a turn in the conversation, he asked,
"Mrs. Belmartin, what happened to her? The daughter of the philosophical doctor's?"
she died. A sudden tragedy."
She closed the door of the philosophical doctor's room behind them, and they were plunged back into the flickering candlelit gloom of the servants' quarters.
"What kind of tragedy?"
"What kind? Have you heard nothing in your time on this earth, bucket boy? When a young girl dies suddenly, there's a word for that cause, and that word is man."
"You mean she was murdered?"
"Not necessarily. Could have been manslaughter, accident, childbirth, the abortionist knife. Could have been 100 other things, but you ask me, at the bottom of most likely outcomes, you'll find a man."
Carden didn't know what to say to that.
"Don't worry, Carden," she said. "You're still just a boy. There's hope for you yet."
She stopped beside a door, and he knocked and waited before opening.
"Good lad," she said.
"You may yet live to make it out of this place.
That night, back in the whitewashed cell he called a room, he sat on his hard cot, examining the 2 lengths of wax he'd stolen. He knew a family, some doors down from where he'd grown up, who would give him a good price to smuggle manor house candles, and would keep their mouths shut. The one that had fallen from the sconce would be worth something. He was less sure about the one from under the cabinet. Why would someone as rich as the philosophical doctor burn tallow candles? They were what peasants used to light their homes. They were what servants used, he thought, jamming it into a candlestick to light their cells. As the bucket boy, light in his room had been a rare luxury. But now that he was a liveried servant, his place in the world was higher. He decided he was never going to live in darkness again. He decided that from now on, whatever it took, he was always going to burn as many candles as he wanted. He touched a lit taper to the tallow candle wick, which caught. A dim flame flared into life, unspooling a gray thread of smoke that stank lightly of rancid pork. He barely noticed the smell. He had lived with worse his entire life. The candle sputtered as bits of badly rendered fat crackled in the burning tallow. Exhausted from the day's work, he sat back on his cot, watching the smoke rise like rain in reverse to pool on the ceiling. Then, something interesting began to happen. At first, he thought it was a trick of his tired brain in the dim light. But no, the smoke began to sink again, as if it was suddenly colder than the air around it. He felt his tongue go dry. The whole room now stank of burnt and rancid meat. As it fell, the smoke spit and curled around an empty space in the air. Carden caught his breath and scrambled back against the cold, whitewashed brick. An empty space, the shape of a crouching figure in the middle of the air. It was a human silhouette. As he looked on in horror, the smoke began to roll down the front of that empty space like a gray silk curtain, blown back against the features of a person standing hidden behind it. He made a small noise, and the outline resolved itself at last. An invisible thing tilted its head at him, a void adumbrated by the smoke. It was a girl, maybe. In the shifting cloud, he thought he caught the outlines of threadbare clothing, threadbare ribs, and hollow sockets where the dark smoke pooled. "Who are you?" he said.
"I am an Iphigen candle."
It was a thin voice, hoarse and difficult to make out, like the voice of someone speaking through the cold cracks of a stone wall.
"I answer questions,"
it said.
"What is your question?"
How do I get you to leave?
"Put the candle out."
He lunged forward, plunging his bare palm down on the wick. Hot fat scalded him as the light went out, and he withdrew, nursing the hurt. He was alone again, in the thin moonlight that filtered through the fist-sized window in the top corner of his room. He passed his hand through the air, above the extinguished tallow, and felt nothing. To be safe, he locked the candle in his strongbox. He sat in darkness for a while, trying to decide what he made of what just happened. He arrived at no conclusions, though he wasn't much for prayers. He prayed that night. The next morning, he saw the new bucket boy going about his rounds and intentionally refused him eye contact. He changed candles, set and cleared silverware, fetched and closeted coats for the guests. It was strange to handle rich men's coats. To Carden's eyes, his new clothes were finer than those belonging to the upstairs people, who dressed in black, white, and brown, not bright green velvet or gold thread brocade. But his brightness, he realized, didn't reflect on his status, but on the Earl's. It was like the golden bridle on a rich man's horse. For so long he had hungered to wear a uniform like this. Now, understanding what it represented, he hungered for a time when he wouldn't have to wear this costume, which meant one thing. He needed money. That night, he paced in darkness for a long time before his mind made itself up. As the moon began to set somewhere beyond his narrow window, he lit the candle again. Again, the crackle, hiss, the stream of smoke, and smell of rancid, carbonizing pork. And again, there above the candle's dim light, hunched the dim, smoky outline of a crouching girl with hollow eyes. His voice quavered as he spoke.
You're an Imogen candle?
He said.
Imogen.
And you have to answer my questions truthfully.
Yes.
And you know everything?
Many things.
He took a moment to think. He had been raised on stories about ghosts and spirits and tricksy fae, and his instinct had been to distrust the candle. But something about the flat lack of effect in its voice made him think it didn't lie. It was like speaking with a brass clock.
Will the philosophical doctor come looking for you?
He said.
How do I hide you?
Performing the ritual of Saint Leodegar on my candle will blind others to its presence.
How do I do that?
She told him, and he extinguished her. The next day, he acquired the ingredients: a gimlet from the wood shop, the eye of a fish from the kitchens, and several of his own tears. These were the hardest for him to acquire. He muddled the tears and the fish eye together over the flame while muttering certain words. Then, after stirring the mixture 6 times counterclockwise with the gimlet, he carved a particular rune into the candle, which he lit.
Did the ritual work?
Yes,
said the girl.
So, the candle can only be seen by me.
Yes.
He paced the narrow width of his room, trying to think what to ask the Imogen candle. Her hollow eyes followed him back and forth.
When the candle burns down, then you're gone forever.
Yes.
Shit.
He tried to think quickly.
Where does the butler hide the money he makes from his side rackets?
He has a strong box in his room,
She said.
but he lives in fear of burglars. So he has buried a trove of guineas underneath the third oak tree from the left in the northeast of the English garden.
Good, he said. Thank you. He suddenly looked up, eyes meeting the patch of smoky darkness where her eyes should have been. Until then, he had always looked away, not wanting to see. But he had surprised himself by thanking her. Thanking was something you did for a person, not for a cursed artifact? He shook his head. He was burning down the candle, wasting his most precious resource. He leaned forward, and she watched, impassive, emotionless, as he blew her out. He dug up the guineas, pocketed a small number, and then buried the rest in a place only he knew. It was quite the nest egg. The butler had been smart and thrifty, not to mention ludicrously corrupt, and it was enough to keep someone living in style for years. In Carden's mind, theft from a thief didn't count for much, and besides, the butler's reputation as a lech with the maids was one of the many things at the manor that trickled down to the bucket boy. But in this world, it wasn't enough for a common man to have money. He needed an excuse for having it. He needed a better job.
Are any of the other footmen keeping a secret?
He asked the candle the next night.
Rackham,
she said.
And Kosh. Rackham gambles and cheats to win.
Does he have money?
Yes.
Guineas?
Hidden behind a loose brick in his room.
And Kosh?
Has debts. He blackmails Rackham to stay above water.
Thank you, Iphigene. May I call you Iphigene?
It does not matter what you call me.
And this time, strangely, she went out of her own accord. The next day, a search of the servants' quarters had been ordered.
Sammet's been stolen,
said Mrs. Balmartin.
From whom?
Said Carden. Mrs. Balmartin could be cold and silent as North County stone if she disliked you, but to those she felt warmly about, Carden included, she could be a great gossip.
Word is, from the philosophical doctor. Some bit of papistry or dark magic, no doubt.
Dark magic? He let his eyes go wide.
But what servant would steal anything like that? No servant would be stupid enough to steal something important in this household,
she said.
But while the upstairs people go through life plundering our Lord's creation, they find it hard to admit an upstairs person would ever descend to so petty a crime as theft.
He was sitting cross-legged on the bed when he heard them coming down the hall. The butler's slow, heavy tread he recognized. But there was another sound that came with him. A quick, metallic tapping that sent a strange fear shivering through his guts. The door swung open, and a shining thing skittered around the crack before the butler could enter. Carden shouted and jumped back on the bed, so he was standing with his back to the wall. It was that brass implement from the philosophical doctor's desk, something like a sundial with spider's legs, except that the arm of the sundial carried a thick, yellow wick, which burned slowly with a low blue flame and dripped red liquid into a collecting tray. The flame stank of sulfur,
and as Carden stared at the thing in revulsion, the sundial part began to gradually tick around in a circle. Some irrational part of Carden's mind told him it was sniffing for something. The butler barged in after it, ignoring both Carden and the machine as he began to tear apart the room. He had a hollow red look in his eyes, as if he hadn't slept, as if he'd been crying and drinking in secret.
"A candle," he said, pausing to glare up at Carden. "Have you seen a candle, bucket boy?"
Not meaning to be smart, sir, but that's all I see every day.
"A different candle, tallow."
A tallow candle, sir? In the Earl's house?
Just then, the brass spider clicked. The arm froze in place, angled at Carden's bed. A small brass hammer on the creature's back flicked against a little bell, sending a clear ding through sudden silence.
"Well now,"
said the butler, his eyes sharpening as he looked up at Carden.
"What are you hiding under your bed, bucket boy?"
Please, sir, it's just my strongbox.
"Key," said the butler. "Now."
Carden handed it over and shrank into a crouch as the butler tore his strongbox out from under the bed and ripped through it, flinging clothes and papers on the ground. The Iphigenia candle was there, in the box, in plain sight. But the butler seemed unable to see or feel it.
"Nothing,"
the butler spat. He glared back at the brass machine with its stinking flame.
"Bloody useless thing. No wonder his lordship's on the brink of throwing the doctor out on the street."
But then, his eyes fixed on something in the box, and a wild, manic look spread across his face.
"Well now,"
he murmured.
Well, well, well now, what have we here, bucket boy?"
He surged to his feet, brandishing a golden coin. With his other hand, he seized Carden by the front of his shirt and slammed him back into the wall.
"Where's the rest of 'em?"
he shouted, and Carden's heart nearly stopped as he realized how badly he may have miscalculated.
Please, sir, I got it from Reckham, from playing cards.
The butler's eyes narrowed.
"Reckham,"
he muttered. He had cheap brandy on his breath.
"You beat Reckham at cards."
Please, I think he was going easy on me.
You don't say.
He let Carden go and took a step back, looking him up and down.
"Reckham always did have a soft spot for pretty boys."
He pulled it from behind a loose stone behind his bed,
said Carden. The butler spat and then stormed from the room without another word. For a long moment, the brass machine lingered, and Carden had a sick sense that somehow, even without any eyes, it was looking at him. Then, the hammer struck the bell a second time, and the brass sundial swiveled around. It left the room, its legs tapping with the sound of sewing needles ringing against your teeth. Quick as he could, Carden shut the door and lit the candle.
"Where can I find Reckham right now?"
he said. Almost before she could finish answering, he blew out the candle and sprinted down the hall. Reckham was in the buttery, eating a late lunch.
"You have to run,"
Carden said, falling against the table to catch his breath.
Kosh told the butler where you keep your winnings hidden. He thinks you've stolen from him.
Reckham turned white.
"You're a good lad, Carden,"
he said, and then took off at a run. When Reckham was gone, Carden sat down and ate the rest of the man's lunch. In the weeks that followed, Carden decided to lie low, with Reckham on the run, Kosh thrown in debtor's prison shortly thereafter, and the butler fired for his drunkenness. Carden had jumped 3 steps up the ladder in as many days. Now, as a comfortably ranking footman, he had access to the upstairs people, and the chance to impress them with his wit, his professionalism, and his well-shaped calves. An easy year or 2 of this, and he might get hired as a valet or a butler by some other household. A few tips here and overheard secrets there, and he might leave service to set himself up in London as a man of business. Yet, even though there was no reason for him to use the candle, he still found himself lighting it most nights. "What's your name?"
I don't have a name. I am an Iphigen candle.
"Were you always an Iphigen candle?"
No,
It was an answer to his question. By the rules that bound her, she did not need to elaborate. But the figure in the smoke hesitated and seemed to shake her head, as if trying to catch hold of a thought. At last, she added,
I was once a girl.
He blew out the candle and she vanished, plunging him into blue darkness. He had suspected it. Since that first night, a creeping suspicion had been growing up his spine. In truth, he had put off asking that question for a long time, because he had not wanted to hear the answer. Now it was all but confirmed. This candle that smoked and sputtered and stank of pork was an abomination. Someone had been murdered to create it. He suspected who, and he suspected by whom. He lit her again the next night. He knew this was imprudent. Each time he lit the candle for no reason, he was wasting a question he might need later. But maybe he was curious. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe there were reasons motivating him without his knowledge. When you were alive, what was your name?
Alana.
Alana. He had always liked the name Alana. Your father was the philosophical doctor?
Yes.
He clenched his fist. The man's own daughter. How could anybody do such a thing? He hesitated. He wanted to ask if she was in pain, but couldn't quite bring himself to say the words. He tried a different angle. Do you like being an Iphigen candle?
No.
Even now, she spoke without affect. Nothing she ever said had any emotion. But in that same flat tone of voice, she said,
I hate it. I wish I could be free.
She had been made into a thing. She wanted to be free. How could he, who had been a living toilet, turned into a living doll in ludicrous clothes, fail to understand? How? He was surprised to find he was fighting back sobs. He who had struggled so hard to produce tears for the rite of St. Leodegar, who had clawed his way up from destitution with a smile on his face. How? He started again. How can I set you free?
I have to go. into the fire that made me,
she said.
Where?
She told him. Because of the rite of Saint Leodegar, the candle only provided light for him alone. As he hurried down the servants' quarters, she floated along the plume of smoke behind him, crawling on all fours through the empty air, as if through a cramped and claustrophobic tunnel. If he glanced backwards, his gorge would rise at the repulsive sight of her, gray and insubstantial, with yawning darknesses for eyes and mouth. So he kept his gaze forward, until he arrived at a familiar door. He stopped and listened for a long moment. No sound from within. He looked for a crack of light under the door. None. He pushed it gently open and emerged into a vast, empty room. Moonlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows to glow upon the gray-blue furniture and carpet, and reflect dully from a black lacquer folding screen in the corner. In front of the cold fireplace stood a large table covered in papers and instruments, beakers, tongs, scalpels, maps of the coast scrawled with arcane sigils and notations, and that brass implement with its spidery legs now curled up on top of it like a butterfly pinned to a card. Carden took little note of any of this, rushing around the table to crouch before the hearth of neatly dressed stone and kindle a flame with shaky hands.
Carden, is it?
A tired voice behind the lacquer screen. A light was uncovered, the sudden glow casting long shadows across the ceiling. Around the edge of the screen stepped a slumped figure with a lit candlestick. Carden froze. The man wore a black silk dressing gown over silk pajamas. Curiously, he also wore one leather glove on the hand that carried the light. He was rubbing his eyes with the knuckles of the opposite hand. Plainly, he had been asleep at the desk behind the screen. Carden had forgotten to knock.
The ritual of Saint Leodegar, was it?
Said the doctor.
I suppose it's here with you now. The candle.
What candle? Said Carden.
I've just been sent to light the fire, sir. If you've come here to destroy it, then you must already know what it is,
said the doctor.
What she is,
said Carden. It was a foolish thing to say, but something had overridden his usual instinct for survival.
Ah, yes,
said the philosophical doctor, sitting himself down in front of the hearth. He was not an old man, but he looked very tired and very gray.
Light the fire, Carden,
he said.
We may as well be warm while we talk.
Warily, Carden bent back to the pile of kindling.
What is there to talk about, sir?
He said.
Do you know,
said the doctor,
I was like you once.
Carden said nothing.
Young, ambitious, poor. Maybe not quite so poor, but not that much better off, believe me.
Mrs. Bell-Martin had often mentioned how much the rich like to pretend they understood poverty.
I bit and clawed my way up the ladder,
the doctor said.
But the further I went, the further I needed to go
to earn the respect of those around me. Do you understand me, Garden? I am personal friends with the Earl, yes, but he doesn't respect me. For all my learning, all I've done for this country, I'm still some jumped-up commoner to him.
A spark flared. Tinder caught light and smoked. Over Carden's shoulder, the silent girl watched. Even here, in the presence of her father, she showed no emotion.
Is that meant to explain what you did, sir?
No,
said the doctor.
it's meant to convince you I'm human and not so different.
Kindling began to catch.
Garden, our country stands on the brink of war. War with all of Europe. Bonaparte could leave Calais and land his grenadiers at Dover within a matter of hours. The very survival of England is at stake.
With respect, sir, what has England ever done for me?
Think what it might do for you. A bright young man, willing to do what it takes to get ahead. A young man with a powerful sponsor. Give me the candle, Cardine, and I'll see that you rise far beyond what you could ever have imagined. Wealth, prestige, knowledge, it can all be yours if you just give me that candle.
He reached out for it. The girl looked at him, expressionless, the span of her half-life burning down, second by second. He did not know what to do. She was not a real girl. She was already dead. But he, Carden, could still be saved.
What should I do?
He asked.
I cannot answer that,
She said.
You should give me the candle, Carden,
said the doctor, thinking the question had been addressed to him.
You'll be richly rewarded. Imagine it, a house like this, all your own.
He chuckled softly.
You'll even have your own bucket, boys. And why shouldn't someone else use the candle you've used so freely? I will use it to save ships and battalions, maybe the entire country, millions of lives in one little bit of wax.
Tallow,
said Carden.
one little bit of tallow.
The philosophical doctor flinched and fell silent. Carden glanced back up at the girl. She had not moved.
Why did you do it, sir?
Carden asked.
To your own daughter.
It was how the spell worked,
said the doctor, in a soft voice.
It was the only way for me to help my country.
Why did he do it?
said Carden, asking her this time.
it was how the spell worked.
She said.
It was the only way for him to help his country and himself.
Do you forgive him?
He listened to her answer and then stared deeply into the fire.
Well,
Said the doctor, in a hoarse voice, licking his lips.
What did she say? She forgives me, right? Surely her dear father, who only wanted to do what was right.
It never stops, does it?
Said Carden.
Does what?
Said the doctor.
No matter how high you climb, I'd end up just like you, wouldn't I?
The philosophical doctor's eyes had gone cold.
Would that truly be so bad? I am rich and respected. I have improved my lot in life purely by hard work, intelligent sacrifice, and...
Without letting him finish, Carden tossed the candle in the fire. It kept its form for only a moment before flames licked away the tallow and burned the wick to nothing. The final beads of human fat snapped and hissed in the flame, and a rush of thick smoke ran up from the hearth, so thick that for one lasting moment, the girl really seemed to be there, and the hand that reached out to brush Carden's cheek seemed almost to have both matter and form. And then, like a drop of ink dispersing in water, she was gone.
Oh,
said the doctor.
I didn't think you were going to do that. I really didn't think you'd be so stupid.
Carden stood up.
Will that be all, sir?
He said.
Yes,
said the philosophical doctor. From inside his dressing gown, he produced a small flintlock and shot Carden through the heart. It seemed to take a long time for the sound of that gunshot to die away. When at last it did, the philosophical doctor sat back in his chair and stared at the body while long minutes dripped by, as slow as wax. At last there came some clamor at the door, the low voices of male servants, followed by the polite, brisk knock of Mrs. Balmartin.
everything's fine.
The philosophical doctor called.
Just an accident, that's all.
And after another moment's murmuring, silence fell on the other side of the door, and he was left alone with the body. Somewhere, the clock struck 3. The sound seemed to rouse him from his torpor, and he stood, stepping over the spreading pool of the boy's blood to rummage through the clutter on his desk. He came away holding some glass vials in one hand and an obsidian scalpel in the other. He sighed. He was so tired of the long, late nights. But the Earl needed many things accomplished, and there was no sense letting good parts go to waste. Thanks for listening, and remember to check out The Wrong Station. All of their links are in my show notes, so check them out there. Thank you so much, and thank you to them again. If you'd like to follow this show on social media, you can follow it at scareyoutosleep on all the socials. You know them all. Follow them there. You can follow me personally at Shelby B. Novak on all the same ones. And you can, if you have a story you'd like considered for the show, you can send it to scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. And please check out my other show, The Bloody Disgusting Podcast, that I co-host with Zena Dixon. And she's great, and it's amazing. And we were doing another deep dive this week that's coming out, and it was so much fun, so funny. So please go check that out. And if you'd like ad-free episodes, you can join my Patreon page, patreon.com/scareyoutosleep, ad-free and bonus episodes. So please go check that out. Thank you so much to all my patrons, by the way, if you're listening. You seriously, you are such lifesavers. I actually needed to buy a new microphone, and because of Patreon, it was not something I needed to cry about. And thank you. I just really, really appreciate you for everything you do. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I think everybody else too, but just giving a quick little shout out to my Patreon patrons. And this week I do have a baking corner. So those of you who aren't a fan of the rambles, you can go ahead, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Goodbye, good night. And for the rest of you who want to stick around, here I am. So yeah, I had baking corner. I finally did. Last week, I had a friend in town to spend the night. If you haven't had an adult sleepover, a non-romantic, a platonic adult sleepover, I highly recommend it. It was so much fun. And I didn't do any baking last week. Sorry, I'm a little bit foggy. I have a lot of brain fog this week, and I saw a few friends this weekend, and they said the same thing. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's the stars, what it is. And anyway, I baked some Parker House rolls, and I made the Texas, like a dupe for the Texas Roadhouse butter for my international listeners, because I don't think Texas Roadhouse is an international restaurant. Their butter is, it's so American. It's crazy. The recipe is like a stick of butter, like a third or something. I forgot how much powdered sugar, then honey, because the powdered sugar wasn't enough. So honey and cinnamon, and I also added some salt because I like really salty butter. So it's so good. It's so good. So I made that. I also made some brownies that were like cheesecake, salted caramel cheesecake brownies. And that was one I kind of threw together piecemeal from different recipes. So I couldn't really give you a recipe for it, but that's the fun of getting better at baking, is you can kind of start to build your own weird stuff. But those were very, 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 very good. I still have one in the fridge waiting for me. Very excited about it. And what else? Anyway, I have a lot of brain fog. I might do another ramble or something soon. I don't know what else to say. What do I usually say here? I don't know. Is there anything you guys like me to talk about? Or do you like these shorter rambles where it's just kind of like, here's where you can find me. Okay, bye. Love you, bye. Because I can do that too. Or I can talk. But I feel at a loss of things to talk about recently. So I apologize for that. But anyway, if I sound froggy, by the way, I'm not getting sick. My allergies are weird. Because that's another thing. The weather here, it was like 95 degrees on Monday. And now it's like I'm bundled up. It is freezing. It's like, I don't know, like 40 something degrees outside. It's weird. It's so weird. The weather is weird. The air is weird. It's just weird. Things are weird. I did have one more thing I was going to tell you, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was now. Must not have been that important. It was something rambly. It wasn't very important. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, I will see you next week. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, because I really enjoyed making it for you. Oh, one of the things I ran into, apart from some technical difficulties, was my upstairs neighbors. I don't know. They have been, since they moved in, they've been very quiet. Other than one time, someone was having a romantic fight up there that got pretty ugly. I don't think like call the cops ugly, but there was just a lot of screaming. And that was like the first time I was like, wow, I've never actually heard them before. Luckily, I live in an older building and the walls are not paper thin. They're pretty thick. And then but like, especially like today, I don't know what they're doing up there. It was constant pounding. It was like they just took a hammer to their entire apartment. I'm sure they were building furniture or something, but it was so nonstop. And this has been going on. And so some of it did make it into this episode. I could hear it. I don't know if you will. You might not. And I hope you don't. But if you do, gold star. You heard my neighbors. But
it was making me like, I was going batty. It was one of those things where like I had to like take a break and go do something, because sitting here, it was like the telltale heart. I'm not kidding. I was just being driven mad by the sound, the constant sound of hammering. And it honestly was to a point where I was like, what could you possibly be doing up there? You're not hanging pictures, because it was just like someone constantly hammering on an object, but like in different parts of the apartment. And then they kept opening their balcony door, and their balcony door is in desperate need of some WD-40. I honestly had thought about dropping a can off up there and just being like, can you please, your balcony door? But that feels, I don't know. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a bad neighbor or rude neighbor. But they kept opening their balcony door and slamming it shut. I don't know what was going on up there. It was one of those moments, though, where I was like, these noises don't even make sense. I'm trying to put together a picture of what's happening, and I can't, because I don't know. And yeah, anyway, I really did feel for the guy in Telltale Heart. I mean, I didn't murder anyone, and I didn't feel like guilt. It wasn't guilt that was getting to me. It was just the noise, but still. Okay, I'm going to go. I, again, apologize this episode's out late, but, you know, life happens, and here it is now. So, fresh for you on a Monday morning. There you go. All right, I'm going to go. You're going to go. We're going to go. You're going to go drink some water. I'm going to go drink some water. We're going to drink some water. Go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.